Okay. Man, there's a lot to say about this album.
Let me do the numbers there first, Josh.
Yeah, let's do that first.
65 in the 1970s is Hotel California by the Eagles. It's number 4 in 1976, number 264 of all time. It is the Eagles' highest-rated album on Best Ever Albums, and it comes in on Rolling Stone's list at 118 of all time.
All right. Hotel California was released December 8th, 1976. We talked about the Eagles' first album back on bonus Cold Listen Hot Take number 4 in this season, and I believe we were all relatively positive on it. The Eagles are one of the best-selling bands ever and one of the most successful acts of the 70s. They have 5 number 1 singles, 6 number 1 albums. Their greatest hits is the best-selling album in the U.S. at 38 million units. Hotel California itself has sold 26 million copies and is the 3rd highest of all time for U.S. sales. They are also one of the world's best-selling bands and were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998. So they have a huge legacy to them. They were formed in L.A. in 1971. The founding members were Glenn Frey and Don Henley, Bernie Layden, and Randy Meisner. And all of them are on vocals, and then Glenn Frey's on guitar, Don Henley's on drums, Bernie Layden's on guitars, and Randy Meisner's on bass. Frey and Henley started out by being a part of Linda Ronstadt's band. I did watch the Eagles documentary, History of the Eagles, in preparation for this, and Linda Ronstadt, who we talked about in Nicole Listen Hot Take, plays pretty prominent role in kind of the creation of the Eagles. She was, as we said, she was another very popular artist in the 70s, and she kind of helped shepherd them and get their start.
That Laurel Canyon doc I watched as well spends quite a bit of time on the formation of the Eagles. Basically, Don Henley is the drummer for Linda Ronstadt's band, and Glenn Frey is sort of a songwriter, and how they all kind of came together. And if you want to find out more, including with archival footage, that's a good place to go to.
Yep. Bernie Layden was from the Flying Burrito Brothers post Graham Parsons, and Randy Meisner was part of Ricky Nelson's Stone Canyon band, and both of them eventually joined Ronstadt's band also. So all 4 of them were her supporting musicians. Frey and Henley decided to form their own band and let Ronstadt know, and she gave their blessing.
It's Glenn Frey too, Josh, just to do cleaning the stacks right there.
Glenn Frey, yep. And then they brought the other 2 on board as well to form the band. They got signed to Asylum Records, David Geffen's new label, after being introduced to him by Jackson Browne. He also figures prominently in their creation, as Glenn Frey lived in Jackson Browne's basement in the apartment that they were living at.
He co-wrote what is that song? Not Running on Empty. What's the Eagles song? He wrote one of their songs. I forget which one.
I can't remember, but it's one of their hits. The Eagles band
Take
name,
It Easy. That's it.
Yes.
Take It Easy. Sorry.
Yeah,
the Laurel Canyon one does show him actually playing that song with the Eagles in the room, and it's like he couldn't finish it, I think was the story they talked about. So he gave it to Glenn Frey.
Yes, he couldn't finish a verse or something, and then Glenn Frey finished it. And the Eagles band name came about when they went to the desert and took peyote and tequila and saw like an eagle flying in the sky. There, I guess, varying accounts of how this came about, but I mean, they said it in the doc that they went out there, and that's some variation of them seeing an eagle when they were out there. So
okay.
Their debut album was recorded in 1972 in England and produced by none other than Glenn Johns from the Beatles' Get Back doc, and among other albums as well.
This might be a time where I ask, it is Eagles, right? Not the Eagles?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, jeez.
I believe so. I believe it is. No, I'm just saying, I think I was at, because I think it's, I learned that from that doc that it is Eagles, not the Eagles.
Okay.
Because I've always known them as the Eagles, right? But it's Eagles, I
mean,
believe.
that's like splitting hairs, really. How are you not gonna?
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Their first single off of that was "Take It Easy," written by Jackson Browne and Glenn Frey. "Witchy Woman" and "Peaceful Easy Feeling" were the other singles off of it. I'm just going to kind of go through a rundown of these other albums leading up to Hotel California, because after that first one, they just keep making albums and touring. Their second album was Desperado from '73, and that was Old West themed. Tequila Sunrise and Outlaw Man were the singles off of that album, and it wasn't as successful as that debut album. This is where Henley and Frey also started to assert more control over the band, infamously, and started kind of all the drama with the Eagles, who I feel like have a history of drama as part of their legacy.
Hell Freezes Over was their reunion tour, right?
Yes, from 1994. I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
On their next album, On the Border, the Henley and Frey wanted to move away from country rock and more into hard rock, were their words. I find it hilarious that they classify themselves as hard rock, but okay. They got rid of Glenn Johns as the producer, and he kind of wanted to stay with the country vibe, or they're more not the hard rock vibe. He didn't see them as that type of sound, and he liked the harmonizing. That kind of what drew him to them.
A smooth sound, yes.
Yeah, that's smooth. So they brought in Bill Szymajczyk. Don Felder also joined the band as the guitarist vocalist at this time, and Already Gone and Best of My Love were the singles off of that, with Best of My Love becoming their first #1 single. One of These Nights was their fourth album and released in '75. It was their breakthrough album and their first of 4 #1 albums. One of These Nights, the title track Lion Eyes, and Take It to the Limit were the singles on it. Lion Eyes won them their first Grammy for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal. And then they went on to worldwide tour and broke worldwide as well. They were on the September 25th, 1975 issue of Rolling Stone. I looked up that cover. They all have their shirts off or open, and
nice,
real chillax in there. And then they played September 28th at Anaheim Stadium to 55,000 people with Linda Ronstadt, Jackson Browne, and Toots and the Maytals of all bands. So Bernie Layden left the band after this album, having been disillusioned with the direction of the band. He wanted to stay with that country vibe. Loss of creative control, that was an ongoing theme with all the other members of the band, and unhappiness with Frey also. So out goes Layden and in comes Joe Walsh, famously. He had been friends with the band and was performing with other bands as well, and was a solo artist. Initially, the band thought he wasn't going to be a good fit, and his personality was too "quote unquote" wild.
So Bernie Layden's not on this album anymore.
He is not on this album.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't know that.
This is the first album with Joe Walsh.
Gotcha. Okay.
And and Walsh had a reputation for wrecking hotel rooms and partying like crazy. There's a story in the doc where he parties with John Belushi. And
oh damn,
they went to tried to go to a restaurant, and it was like a jacket and tie type of nice restaurant, and they were wearing jeans, so they wouldn't let him in. So then I think they were probably on cocaine or something. John Belushi got the idea to spray paint their jeans black, and then they got in and sat down on these chairs and got spray paint all over the chairs. So that's an example. And also Joe Walsh, throwing TVs out of hotel room windows, and other band members corroborate this stuff, and he fully admits to partying hard while in the band.
Joe Walsh is also a terrible contestant on Rock and Roll Jeopardy. He knew nothing.
Well, that's probably all the drugs that they did.
Yeah.
And so yeah, in early '76, the Greatest Hits album was released, and Hotel California was released December 8th, 1976. So kind of that 1-2 punch of both of these albums really rocketed sales for them. This was recorded between March and October of 1976, and they split between LA and Miami production studios. It received generally positive reviews by critics, with Charlie Walters of Rolling Stone feeling that it showcased, quote, the best and worst tendencies of LA situated rock, which I thought was funny, which is why I included it. Yeah. New Kid in Town, Hotel California, and Life in the Fast Lane were the singles. Hotel California, the song had some controversy. I guess it was a lot of people took liberties with how it was to be interpreted. They thought there was symbolism in there. Some people thought it was even about Satanism and tried to read into the picture on the album cover and some nonsense like that. But they all discounted that and said it wasn't about any of those things. Hotel California won Grammy for Record of the Year, and this was the last album to feature Randy Meisner on bass, and he left the band after their 1977 tour. Timothy B. Schmidt from the band Poco was then brought in to replace him, and Henley said that in 1982 that the Eagles, quote, probably peaked on Hotel California. So I will stop there. I have some wrap-up stuff because we're not covering them again, and they actually break up shortly after this album. So Hotel California, famous album. Matt, what are your thoughts on Hotel California?
So I knew this album actually better than I thought I did. This is an album that I think my brother had years and years ago, and I'm sure I know some of my uncles did too. So I remember, so a lot of the songs on this album were familiar. Mm-hmm. And as I might have mentioned in the past on this podcast, I am not usually counting myself as a big fan of the Eagles. Yes. I think I've said that they seem overrated and kind of I just don't get it. I think that's, the fact that they've sold so many records, I don't know. To me, there's other bands that kind of do what they do, and I just like them better. So I'm like, mm-hmm. why are the Eagles like this, band? And maybe that kind of contributes to my, dislike of them as a whole. But I did listen to this album, trying to be as open-minded as possible. I will start off by saying I have always liked Hotel California. I know that that's probably a song that some people point to as being, an overrated type song. I don't know. I really like it. I think I like the melody. I like the harmonies on it. I would say overall that their harmonies are very good. I think it's a very solid song musically. I love the ending, like the guitar solos at the end. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's like 2 or 3 guitars playing the solos there in sync, but very good production. And I've always liked that song. It's never really been old for me. I've always liked The Last Resort as well, and after listening to it more on this record, that's easily my favorite song on this record. I think that's a beautiful song. I love it. Is long. It's 7.5 minutes long, but I like the way that it builds. I think it's got a really great melody, and I like Don Henley's voice on it. Just very, very pretty song, so I'm very high on that. So those are my 2 high points, I'd say. The song that stood out to me as being one that I probably didn't recognize as much, but I did find myself liking, was Wasted Time. So I thought that was another pretty song that they did. And I think the song that I would have said, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, crap, I think I hate this song. But ended up kind of coming around a little bit on it, was The New Kid in Town. Not a big fan of the chorus of that. I think the chorus is a little weak, but mm-hmm. the end, I do find myself towards the end of the song getting more into it. And it's interesting that the one guy left the band because he felt that he didn't like the direction and wanted to stay more country. There's still country elements here. It's not like they abandoned that, so it's kind of interesting that he did that. I mean, there's not really like slide guitar or distinctive country music instruments, but the songs are there. As for like, if you throw a couple slide guitar notes on that, it's like boom. It's like it's very easy to discern that that's a country song. A New Kid in Town kind of fits in that lane for me. but what I really don't like on this album are the rock. I don't like and never liked Life in the Fast Lane. I've never liked Victim of Love. They're just like these generic 70s rock songs. And by the end of this week, those are the only songs that I was really going, I don't like these, right? I kind of found myself in some way, shape, or form liking the other songs. So overall, I think I do like this album. But I don't think the Eagles do well when they rock out, when they try to do their hard rock that they're trying to do. Just that guitar lick in Life in the Fast Lane just never did it for me. The Victim of Love seems just kind of like a lazy rock song. It just got nothing to it. It's just like let's just throw a couple of like electric guitar songs on here and have those be our rock out ones, when they were doing much better with the more ballads, the slower songs, the more melodic, pretty kind of songs that they were doing. So I'd say I'm going to give this a thumbs up. Again, they're not my favorite band. I don't think that they're worth all the adulation that they get and all that stuff. I think that's just, I kind of roll my eyes a little bit at that, but I also think that this suffers a little bit just from that, when I was a younger kid, and I certainly wasn't into country rock or Americana or anything as a kid, this was really something I disliked. It seemed like weak and wimpy, and just, I was much more into harder music at that time, probably synth rock as well, new wave stuff that was catchy, and this didn't do it for me. So I think that this album does it's I'm a little biased going into it, because there were some elements of this that I still couldn't let go of that maybe I would have liked had I never heard it before. But overall, I liked it. I think I could just do without those rocked out songs, and like Pretty Maids All in a Row and Try and Love Again. I think both of those songs I liked fine as well. So I'll give it a thumbs up. But Last Resort and Hotel California, the bookends of the record, are definitely the high points for me.
Gotcha.
So this was an interesting one, because the Eagles, to me, I kind of have the Matt thing with the Eagles, that they were like a greatest hits band for me. Yeah. Like I had no concept of the Eagles from 1972 to 1980 as a album band. I knew of like their greatest hits, right? That sold a bajillion copies.
They have so many hits too.
Well, right. It's but more so than even bands that have a lot of hits that I still can think of them as albums. I just thought of them as greatest hits band. So it was very interesting to me, because this album, I didn't realize how much it would stand as the middle ground between the Eagles album that we listened to start their debut, which had a very different vibe. It was almost like a beginning of the 70s album that had a lot more in common with, it was a little bit, I would say, leaner. The Eagles are always well produced, right? That's kind of a hallmark of them. They're kind of that, and they always have a little bit of that California soul, or California sound, I'd say, with elements of country in it, and that certainly is here too. I think what I didn't realize was how much this was like arena rock, because to me, this was like an arena rock album, and I don't know if I was expecting that as much. Now, it's not bombastic, I think, is why I didn't think of it as an arena rock album for so long. But this is definitely an album that is designed to be sung in an arena, I feel like. And I don't know if I was expecting that. It also shares a lot in common with like Don Henley and Glenn Frey's solo careers. It basically is proto for what they sounded like. Like a song like Life in the Fast Lane, you're like, I could see Don Henley writing that song in 1985, as well. I think that was what surprised me a little bit. Is this a theme album, Josh? Because every song sort of is about California, and it's like both a love letter and sort of California also can eat you up, all the songs to some degree.
Yeah, it's never really stated as a theme album. I think that's just kind of the direction it went. Hotel California, that song is kind of about that, but there's not really a concept to this. Okay.
I felt like all the songs to some degree were about California and the juxtaposition between Land of Opportunity, Go West Young Man, California lifestyle, but also, underneath the surface, there's also some darkness or on some uncertainty. I felt like all the songs kind of trod that ground, which I think the Eagles spend a very, very large amount of time in. That's, to me, a lot of the vibe of the Eagles. Mm-hmm. I like this album better than I thought I was going to be. I don't know if I'm as vocal negative as Matt has been historically, but I think I always laugh. Like, Matt had the words of the negativity, but I think I might have not liked the Eagles more than he did, but not kind of vocalized it as much in terms of our time. I think the biggest thing for me with the Eagles is the Eagles don't... now, let me start by saying Hotel California is a really good song. So it's undeniably a very good song. So an easy say right there, right? That they're, in my opinion, their most famous song. And as Josh said, they have 1,000 singles, so that's saying something to be the biggest single by the Eagles, right? I just always feel like the Eagles don't have another gear. And I think that's what always kind of drives me nuts about them. I wouldn't say they're forgettable necessarily, but there is nothing about the Eagles that I think if I was in the 70s would have driven me out the door to want to see the Eagles, which is, I think, what always baffles me about how many people bought their albums, because they're the quintessential band for me where it's like, in the right moment or time, maybe, right? But like at no point do I listen to the Eagles and go, oh man, I gotta have that album, right? That's a definitive piece. And they might be the biggest selling band that I feel that way about. Because almost every like huge selling band, like at some point or another, there's a piece of music that is like, oh, that's the one to get, you know? And I think that's what it is. And I can't describe it because I don't dislike the Eagles, but they just, they don't have that je ne sais quoi for me that pops out at me. Lyrically, they're not terrible. They're fine, but there's nothing profound in here either. You know, Hotel California, I think, is the closest it gets to some wordsmithing. And you know, it's an interesting song. I don't know where the whole satanic I mean, I didn't get that at all. It's I guess there's like a little bit of mysticism, right? And I guess you could kind of say it's ominous, like if you have like lyrics like you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. But that doesn't strike me as like violent or satanic. It's more sort of existential, right? Like your soul. To me, it's about California, right? You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. Sort of California behind. That's how I always felt that, or the West Coast vibe. So I was decidedly neutral on this album. There is absolutely nothing to hate or dislike about this album. But I think the other side of the coin on this is there's also nothing, unless you take Hotel California as a single, and then I can definitely buy it, that takes it up a notch for me, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't like this album, and I don't really like the Eagles as a whole. I tried to come from the perspective of getting a new take on it. I've never really liked them, and so I was trying to not fall into kind of that stereotypical mindset when listening to this. I liked the first album, their debut album, more than this one.
I agree about that. I did too. Yep.
By
quite a bit, actually, Josh.
I don't know if I would actually. I might disagree with that, but yeah.
For whatever reason, I just really don't like their vibe. I think it just gets back to that kind of no edge thing, or like John said, they're taking it to another gear. They don't have that to me. This whole album is like a desert cowboy vibe to it. It seems like again, that like LA desert. They're definitely, admittedly trying to model themselves after the Byrds and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and those are, well, Crosby, Stills and Byrds are kind of a band that I was mixed on also, and as a positive, I mean, they harmonize really well together, and that's kind of in line with those bands as well. I think they are trying to be the next iteration of those types of bands. For a band that has so many egos and self-admitted alpha males, as they said multiple times in the documentary, none of that seems to come through in the music for me. There is no sort of like raw power or sexuality or like any sort of testosterone that I get from this album.
Anger?
Anger. Yeah, any sort of like powerful emotions.
Come on, life in the fast lane, man. They're living the fast life, you know?
Yeah, I guess that's the only song I like on this album,
God,
actually.
Oh, wow. I'm with Matt on that. That's my least favorite song on the album.
Sucks.
So it's just something about their vibe again, and this music that never really appeals to me. Their slow song, they don't have enough like cool guitar stuff to make me like them in that way, and their lyrics and kind of their laid back vibe throughout all the songs never works for me either.
Now, I will mention a lot of people love the guitar work. I always think of that Foo Fighters documentary where Taylor Hawkins is just like dying to meet. Was it Joe Walsh? I think
it was Joe Walsh. Yeah, I mean Joe Walsh was like, what? That's the thing. Once he came in, he was he's the guitar guy.
Yep.
And I did like the guitar on this album. I will vouch for me personally. I did like it, but it's a certain type of guitar. You know, it's not heavy in any way. Yeah.
Nope. And that's the other strength. They have multiple singers and multiple guitarists, 3 guitarists actually, and all 3 of them can play well. And so for a band, I don't know, I get the impression that they really wanted to be like this hard rock band, and they were certainly very successful, but they really wanted to see themselves as rock and roll stars. At least that's my impression, and be like harder than they were. I don't know if they had a chip on their shoulder or what, but they never kind of reached that level for me. I thought, and that seems to be a through line through all of their albums, even from their debut one. They just kind of stayed in this specific like milieu of lyrics and sound, and it never has worked for me. So
you want to hear a crazy take from me? I'll go big take right here, hot take. I feel the Queens of the Stone Age are like the fully formed version of what the Eagles were
and I really like Queens of the Stone Age.
Well, you think about it, they have that West Coast desert vibe, right? And they just plug in their guitars more, but they do have sort of a smooth. They have elements of the Eagles to me. They're just like what would have happened if the Eagles actually became a hard rock band. Mm-hmm. I've always felt that way about the Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah,
personally, I don't know if that makes sense, but
I don't know. I don't think I know Queens of the Stone Age enough to comment on that. Very possible. I think it's interesting that if the Eagles wanted to be a more of a rocking band. And Don Henley says that this is the high point of their career. This is not a rocking album. This is a mellow record. There's 2 songs on here that I think that you could, because I don't think Hotel California rocks in the way that a power ballad could rock, right? You know what I mean?
This album doesn't rock more than the Pink Floyd album does, I'd like to point out.
No. So it's not a hard, and I think the Eagles, aside from their harmonies, I think their biggest asset is their gift for melody, because there's some really pretty melodies in here, and a lot of those are in those slower songs. I think when they try to branch out into the rock and roll element, that's when they start to lose me.
I agree
much more, and I think again, the first album that we covered, I think they seemed like that was way more rocking out than this is. So it's interesting to juxtapose those ideas together, because it's not, if they're trying to rock out, this is not that they're not doing it here. And then I would also say that I think that, John, you have it right. I think that's a good way of putting it, that the extra gear there. I think that there's some things on here that are fine and some things that I think that are pretty good. But I never get to the next level with them. I think the closest, like I said, you might get is like Hotel California, The Last Resort. Other songs that I have, like Desperado, you mentioned that album, Josh. That's a song that I like, but again, it's another slower song. Yeah. Well, and again, it's musically, I think it's a pretty song. So, I don't know. If somebody puts it on, I'll probably get all like, oh God, the Eagles, like blah blah blah. But it's at least with this album, this is somewhat decent. It probably sounds like I might be the highest on this record of the 3.
I'm neutral on it. I don't dislike it at all. I think Josh is probably the most negative on it.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, I just don't. Yeah, I don't get it. In some ways, maybe their, I don't want to say blandness, but their soft rock vibe that is what makes them appealing for a lot of people. And I will add that my mom loves this band, and she was at that concert in 1977 at in DC that appears on the documentary. And so she has strong nostalgic feelings for this band and kind of where she was in her life, and that vibe I think works for her. So it clearly works for a lot of people, just not for me.
Well, I remember when they did get back together in the 90s for that Hell Freezes Over tour. My mom did go, and she was like torn because the ticket cost her $100, and that was like a huge deal in '94. You didn't pay $100 to see a show, so things have changed.
Well, my dad might be the outlier because I think his take on the Eagles is like, yeah, they suck.
Yeah. They've been an easy punching bag over the years too. Right. I think.
Yeah, and unfairly.
And I think part of that backlash, at least for me, it goes back to this is what people call the greatest American rock band of all time, or this is one of the best selling bands of all time. Right. It makes me go, God,
it also might suffer from, sometimes there's stuff that sounds really profound in your generation, and some stuff also was not heard right in the 70s, and we're starting to see, and there's stuff in the 90s. Like I had a friend who I played some songs. He asked me for some songs I liked from the 90s, and I gave him like 4 songs I thought were really good, and one he loved. One he said was pretty good, and 2 he's like, oh, that sounds like the 90s. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, and I'm like, well, and that might be a little bit of what the Eagles is, because by the time I discovered the Eagles in the 90s, I might be hearing like, that sounds like a type of 70s that if you were in the time, it appealed, but by the time like 1992 and 3 hit, and I was listening as, a young man, it just wasn't hitting me in the way it did. And so I think some of it is a little bit of that, that you just, it might just be, as you said, Josh, it might just be, when you were in that era, it hit a certain way, but then 20 years later, sort of the themes and what they encapsulized maybe weren't as universal. We were in a disaffected, edgy era too, and you listen to the Eagles, and it's like, when you're listening to like Nirvana, and stuff like that, and then you're listening to the Eagles, it's almost the exact opposite.
It doesn't seem like the band has a personality, or like even personalities within the band. Speaking of like a band with personality like Van Halen, there's no like kind of singular characteristic to the Eagles. I don't feel like they even have like good stage presence, when you were saying, based on what I saw on the thing on the doc. So I don't know. It just, what's the appeal to seeing them live? Or
listeners, listeners who love, share with us, challenge us, tell us what we're missing. Yep.
So just to wrap up, that they made one more album after this. Well, technically 2. The next album was called The Long Run, and it took them 2 years to complete. And they still had some huge hits on it. Heartache Tonight, The Long Run, and I Can't Tell You were all big
singles. I forgot about Heartache Tonight. I hate that's another song I hate.
Yeah,
they should rock. I don't think the Eagles should rock. I think that's my biggest problem with them.
That is a 70s song too, by the way. Holy
yeah.
God, that's 70s song, yeah.
Tensions reached a peak in 1980 between Fry and Felder after they performed a show for California Senator Alan Cranston. They had a big fight backstage, and I think Fry threw a bottle at Felder, and he left the band. The Eagles completed a live album separately, all separately in different locations because they weren't getting along to fulfill a record contract. And even that album sold well, and Seven Bridges Road was actually a single off of that album. The band did break up in 80 and was on hiatus, quote unquote. They said a hiatus from 80 to 94, and during that time they all had solo careers, and you can hear look up all their hits that Fry and Don
Heat
Henley
is
had.
on.
Yep.
Boys of Summer. All She Wants to Do Is Dance.
Yep.
End of Innocence, or Age of Innocence, right?
End of the Innocence, that's right. Yeah.
And then, as John said, they reunited in 94.
All She Wants to Do Is Dance, one of my least favorite songs in the history of music.
I just said that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a God.
They reunited in 94 for the Hell Freezes Over tour, which was another big success and sold millions of albums and was a big famous tour. In 1998, they went at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony, all 7 Eagles played together for 2 songs. So all the original members of the band, plus Joe Walsh and Timothy Schmidt, who joined there at the end. And that's about it. Glenn Frey died on January 18th, 2016, at the age of 67. All the other members of the band are still alive. In 2017, Don Henley reunited the band again with a lineup including Deacon Frey, Glenn Frey's son, and Vince Gill from Country World. They all performed as the Eagles, and they continue to perform and release things to present day.
Wow.
So they're there in some form or fashion.
They're still in operation. Damn. Didn't know that.